Hey, attorney Zac Bailey with the Marc Lopez Law Firm to talk about some of the collateral consequences a second OVWI can have on your record. So a lot of people deal with an OVWI situation, get probation, something like that, and then a few years later, they're charged with a second OVWI, and they're shocked at the possible consequences, how they've gone up from their first time around. They ask, why can't I just get probation again? And oftentimes the answer is from the prosecutor, because it didn't work the first time. We're back here. And that's why the state is so difficult on second-time OVWI offenses. But it's not just the state and their plea offer that's more difficult. The charge itself is much more serious the second time around. If that second OVWI offense occurred within 7 years from the date of conviction of the last OVWI, the state will charge you with a level 6 felony instead of a misdemeanor OVWI, even if everything else is the same, even if there's no crash involved, even if there are no kids in the car, even if otherwise it would have been a misdemeanor act. Just having a prior OVWI within 7 years before elevates this one to a level 6 felony. That moves the maximum punishment up from 1 year up to 2.5 years for a level 6 felony. So it's much more serious the second time around. Now let's say you're outside of that 7-year period. That doesn't take all the collateral consequences away. Even though you won't be charged with a level 6 felony, you are looking at a mandatory minimum of 5 days in jail if you're convicted. That's if you have one prior OVWI conviction. If you have 2 priors, that mandatory minimum goes up to 10 days in jail. It doesn't matter how far back we're talking. So a lot of people will say, that first one was 20 years ago. Is that still being used against me? Yeah, it is. Not for the felony, but for those 5 statutory jail days. Now, another collateral consequence is if that first OVWI caused injury to someone. Any subsequent OVWI is going to be treated much more seriously than just a misdemeanor. So we're talking about a major felony OVWI charge if your first OVWI seriously injured or killed someone. So the consequences are much higher the second time around. And that's just the second time. If we're talking about a third OVWI case, you become eligible for possibly becoming a habitual traffic violator or a habitual vehicular substance offender. So each time these penalties seem to get exponentially worse. And that's not just from the prosecutor's office. That's coming from the Indiana legislature, who puts these penalties in place to make each OVWI penalty much more serious than the time before. If you're facing an OVWI and it's not your first, it's so important to give us a call so we can talk about your options and what we can do to try to mitigate this right from the start. So give us a call, 317-632-3642, and remember, always plead the fifth.